Welcome, my guests, to a podcast of ghouls and ghosts, witches and monsters, gore and fright. On this episode of I Need to See That, we begin our month-long miniseries, Feb-Boo-Scary, with a conversation about horror comedies. Mwah-ha-ha-ha-ha.
In the history of the Academy Awards, 6 horror films have been nominated Best Picture. Can you name them?
Get Out.
Get Out is one.
The Exorcist.
Exorcist is one.
Carrie?
Not Carrie.
Not Carrie.
That's a good guess. Does Jaws count or no?
Jaws does count, number 3.
3.
And by number 3, I mean the third one you guessed. It was the
Yeah,
number 2 in
Understood.
line.
What years are the others?
1991.
Sounds of the Lambs.
Yep. 2 more. 1999.
1999.
Sixth Sense?
C.
Sixth Sense?
Dead.
Oh, yeah.
I said it.
People.
I
Sixth Sense,
Yeah.
yes. I know, no,
That's a
you
good one.
got the credit.
Like, wait.
And the last one was from 2010, and it's a psychological horror.
Black Swan.
Black Swan, you got it. Those are the 6 films that have been nominated for Best Picture. Some huge gaps there, though. That means Psycho was not nominated. That means Halloween was not nominated. These are incredible movies. Rosemary's Baby. You already said Carrie. None of those got nominated. This is I Need to See That, a podcast about movies. I'm Eli.
And Caroline?
I'm Ethan.
And we are starting our first ever mini-series. This is Feb-Boo-Scary.
Feb-Boo-Scary.
We're talking about horror films all month, and I've never been more excited in my life. This week we're doing a general overview of horror. We're going to go through a little bit of a history lesson of horror. And then we're also going to talk about horror comedies. Next week we're talking supernatural, which we're going to include zombies, ghosts and paranormal, monster movies, sci-fi horror. The week after that we're doing gore, which will include slasher films, torture porn,
Caroline
video
is
nasties.
so unhappy as Eli's even just naming subcategories. She has her hands over her eyes as he names subcategories of this genre.
I feel like saying the word gore made you almost throw up.
I know.
Is
'cause
gore a trigger word?
I hate gore.
What about Al
okay.
Gore?
Yeah.
Al Gore was one of my first crushes, so we're into it. I can watch Inconvenient Truth every day of the week.
And then the week after that, we're doing psychological horror, which I think is where Caroline will really start to enjoy horror films. This is going to be a great month. I'm really excited to talk. Ethan, how do you feel?
I'm really excited too. I've had a really good time sort of breaking down, thinking about the different genres within horror. I had a really good time making my comedy list. I was not a horror person growing up, but especially getting into college, I just started to fall in love with the genre. I feel like it is the best communal and solo viewing experience. Like, you can watch a horror movie alone, can watch it in a theater. It works for both. There's a reason that only horror movies are really making money still. So I think it's a great genre.
So I've been reflecting on this quite a bit because I'm the same. Growing up, I never watched horror. I was scared of the horror section at the video store we used to go to. It was only in college where I started watching horror, actually, because up until then, I was very much a student of comedy. I was like, I'm going to college. I need to know everything there is about comedy. This was elementary school, middle school, high school. I was just binging comedies. And it got to the point where I ended up working in the video store. It got to the point where, like, I'm pretty sure I saw almost every movie that was in the comedy section. And it's kind of like I don't know what got me into horror. I think I went to college and was like, who wants to watch History of the World Part 1? And my friends were like, we want to watch Eraserhead. And then slowly I just got into horror films. And I joined, there was like a cult film club. And one of the first movies they showed was a movie called Who Can Kill a Child? And that got me really into like fucked up 70s horror, which we'll go over that when we go over the history. But to me, it's kind of like spicy food, where I never ate spicy food my whole life. And then like 5 years ago, I dieted because I needed to lower my cholesterol, y'all. It's called Ashkenazi Judaism. It comes with high cholesterol. But I stopped eating sugar, and the day after I stopped eating sugar, my body was like, I want spicy food, which was brand new to me. And so I ate it, and suddenly like I realized, oh, there are subgenres of spicy food. Now I know what a Szechuan peppercorn tastes like versus like a chipotle pepper, or what red pepper flakes taste like. Like there's so many different genres of spicy, just like there's different genres of horror. Which leads me to Caroline, who last week said, I don't watch scary movies. That's like me saying I don't eat spicy food, but now I realize there are different genres within spicy, just like there are different genres within horror.
Eli, you landed that plane. I was in doubt. I didn't know if we were going to get there, but we got there.
Yeah.
I didn't know where I was going, but hey, look, we got there.
I guess. Okay. My question about horror, I was like kind of looking, are there really any female directors and writers for horror? Because I was looking and I was like, I would love to watch something by like a female director or female writer, and I didn't see any.
That's a really good question, and like probably I don't know off the top of my head without like diving into some Letterboxd list, but certainly a lot of the like very famous horror movies are very male created, and even if it stars a female, which there's a famous scream queen genre that we'll talk about, like it's a very masculine genre,
and I think that's probably why I've like avoided it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the quote unquote masters of horror is a very boys heavy club. Having said that, there are absolutely incredible female-directed horror films, The Babadook being one of them by Jennifer Kent. That's just one, but there are an unlimited list, and honestly, I can probably create a list of female-directed horror films. One interesting thing, though, is horror is one of the first genres starting in the 70s to have really strong female leads. That's when you get the idea of the final girl. That's when you get the idea that and these tropes that you see in horror films. Of course, in the 90s and the early 2000s, it's like boobs. But throughout the history of horror, there is an argument to be made that horror might be one of the better genres when it comes to gendered equality.
Okay. I'm open.
What's your history with horror, though, Caroline?
I mean, okay, I love Scream. I like It Follows. I think I like psychological stuff. I've avoided all the Ari Aster stuff. I don't want to watch any of that. It feels very gratuitous to me. I read the plot and I'm like, this is not for me. I just feel like, I see so many horrible things on the news. I don't want to then watch it in my free time in horror.
That's fair. I was thinking of why I like horror so much. And I think it's because, and I'm about to go through a history of horror. By the way, this is going to be a very Eli talks too much episode. We get emails saying I talk too much or Eli and Ethan mansplain too much. Very fair, very valid. Absolutely. 67% of our audience are female. We love that. We want to continue that trend. We apologize for our mansplaining nature.
My time is coming. My time is coming when I get to talk housewives, everybody.
Why I like horror so much is I think horror, more than any other genre, reflects what is happening in society and is a reaction to what is happening in society. When I go through this history, you're gonna see direct correlations between new trends in horror and what is happening in the actual world. It's kind of a fascinating sociological study, reading the history of horror.
And now we present to you the history of horror.
I'm going to do a history of horror. I apologize if I talk too much. Just cut me off. All right. But let's start with the history of film, okay? So in 1895, the first, quote, feature film came out. It's 30 seconds long. It's called La Rose. I probably butchered that. It's translated to the Watered.
Oh.
Yeah, the Waterer watered, or the Sprinkler sprinkled. I don't know. It's not good. But it's like an 1895 film. It's train pulling into station or people walking. But there are also a lot of movies that came out around that time that are so friggin' cool with a ton of like practical special effects. That same year, some people reference this as the first horror movie, but there was a movie that came out that recreated the beheading of Mary, Queen of Scots. That's really cool. I think it's like 30 seconds long also. But 1896 was the first movie that many people considered the first, quote, horror film. It was called Le Manoir du Diable, House of the Devil or Manor of the Devil. It's 3 minutes long and it's awesome. It's directed by Georges Méliès. I think that's how you pronounce it. Do you know who he is, either of you?
Ben Kingsley and Hugo.
You got it. Ben Kingsley and Hugo. He's the guy who directed the A Trip to the Moon, the Smashing Pumpkins, Moon. Yeah. So he's an artist, and there's a ton of really cool special effects in that movie. It's 3 minutes long. It's on YouTube. You could watch it. It's cool. There's like dancing skeletons and things. But that was what many people considered the first horror film. So over the next few years, a ton more came out. There was mostly literary adaptations. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde came out. There's a Thomas Edison produced Frankenstein. And there's a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. I'm just setting the scene. It's 1895 to early 1900. Very short, black and white, silent horror adaptations are coming out. Cool?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Around this time, World War I ends. And influenced by the ending of World War I and all the crap that people saw, German expressionist art starts getting really dark and gothic. So then in 1920, the first horror masterpiece comes out in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Have either of you seen that?
No.
Okay. Caroline, you specifically. If you think of Tim Burton's aesthetic, it's all Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. That's 100% where Tim Burton gets his thing. All of the... If you think about Tim Burton and you think about the underworld in Beetlejuice, or like weird clown bicycle surgery scene in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, or anything from Nightmare Before Christmas, it's all Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It's like a 1-for-1 in his aesthetic. I highly recommend you watch that. That's from 1920. 2 years later, in 1922, we get Nosferatu, the hit vampire movie. So these are big hits. People are watching them. A couple years later in America, Universal Pictures enters the horror game. They make Phantom of the Opera in 1925, which is also a big hit. In 1927, The Jazz Singer comes out. Not a horror film except for, racism, but it's the first feature film with sound. The next year in 1928, The Terror is the first horror film with sound. And then also in 1928, Universal Pictures releases The Man Who Laughs, which I highly recommend you watch as well. All right, so that's like setting up how we get here with horror. Cool? With me so far?
Yeah.
All right. In 1930, we enter the golden age of horror. Okay, I'm going to throw some names out there. In 1931, you get Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi.
Hot.
Also in 1931, you get Frankenstein, starring Boris Karloff. Hot. You also get Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You get The Invisible Man. You get The Mummy. A couple years later, you get Creature from the Black Lagoon. You get The Wolfman. We're in the classic Universal monsters, y'all. This is the good stuff, right? Have you seen any of these movies? I know you've heard of them because of Looney Tunes and Universal Studios.
I'm excited for Jacob Elordi as Frankenstein in the next year or so.
There's 2 coming out, aren't there? Aren't there 2
Hot.
Frankenstein movies?
Yeah,
Hot.
he's well, it was originally supposed to be Andrew Garfield, and which also hot, and the recast is Jacob Elordi.
By the way, the Mummy is also Boris Karloff. I didn't realize that. All right, so we're in the classic Universal movie scene. That's where we're at. At the same time, the Hays Code comes into effect. Do either of you know what the Hays Code is? We're going to go all over the place with this history lesson. Okay, so William Hays...
Wait, let's guess. Let's at least guess.
Okay, guess what the Hays Code is.
Caroline, you guess first.
It's when I have to watch 7 horror films to really join this podcast.
I think it's that every horror movie has to give a synopsis of Rutherford B. Hayes' presidency before it gets to any scares.
Yes, Ethan, that is exactly correct. Let me move on.
Cool.
I'm kidding. So buckle up, because if you haven't heard of the Hays Code, Ethan, I feel like this is going to ruffle your feathers.
Okay.
William Hays is essentially a super religious Republican politician with Christian values. He writes something called the Hays Code, which is essentially a list of Christian values aimed to censor cinema. So on the list was no sex, no alcohol, no drugs, minimal violence, no interracial relationships, no depiction of white slavery. Yes, this was really on there. Okay, this is the Hays Code. And this was adopted by major movie studios as the production code and officially was applied to all studios and all films from 1934 to 1968.
68?
Yes. Every movie that came out from major motion picture studios had to follow this production code. Okay? If you saw movies from that time, you probably saw the MPPDA logo, which stood for Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America. So William Hays becomes the president of the MPPDA. And basically, any movie that wants to be produced, any screenplay, is reviewed by the MPPDA board and approved or declined or heavily censored. Every single film studio adopts it. Why are they doing that? It's because at this time is the Great Depression. And so people don't have money. They're not seeing movies. And essentially William Hays goes, well, religious people will see movies. And all the movie studios go, okay. And they adopt this. By the way, the MPPDA later on changed their name to the MPAA. And in 1968, when the production code goes away, enter the rating systems, which are still around to this day. Isn't that fucked up? Anyway.
Wow.
One other thing that's fucked up is at the time, all 5 movie studios also owned all of the movie chains. So literally, if you see a movie in a movie theater, it has to follow the code. This lasted until 1948, when the Supreme Court ruled in U.S. versus Paramount Pictures that this was a monopoly and movie theaters can't be owned by the studios making the movies. So once that ruling comes into effect, now movie theaters can show foreign films and independent films, neither of which follow the code. And this very much affects horror films for decades to come.
Wow.
Cool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's an example of the Hays Code, though, just so you know. In the movie Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein says, "It's alive! It's alive! In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God!" By the way, can we add some applause? Because that was fucking good. Thank you.
You're a good actor, Eli.
Thank you so much. That's what it says in Frankenstein. But because he says the line, "I know what it feels like to be God," the Hays Code absolutely did not like that because it goes against Christian values. So they changed it with, "It's alive! It's alive! Thunder."
Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Anyway, I think that's interesting. That's what's happening in the times. In the 1940s, you get some good horror movies like Cat People, but most of the horror films you saw, because it's pre-1948, was very much it's all monitored by the production code. In 1948, you get a good one that leads us to horror comedy, which is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. There's a good series of Abbott and Costello meet movies where they meet each of the Universal classic monsters.
Fun.
Highly recommend those. All right, so now let's go into the 1950s, okay? World War II is over, the Red Scare begins, and McCarthyism is running wild. And you're going to see these themes throughout the horror movies that come out in the 50s. Because you know the story. Oppenheimer made the bomb. Truman dropped it. Nobody knew what the outcome of atomic weapons would be. So now we start getting a ton of movies like Godzilla in 1954. Also Them in 1954, which is giant ants. You also get Attack of the 50-Foot Woman in 1958, which is about to be remade by Tim Burton. You get one of my favorite movies growing up, Attack of the Giant Leeches in 1959. And another favorite, The Giant Gila Monster in 1959. Basically, there's a long trend of atomic bomb dropped, every animal's going to become giant and attack us movies. These are all low-budget, fun schlock horror films. You have to remember at the time when you went to see a movie, you wouldn't be going to see just one movie in a movie theater. You'd be going to see a double bill. So there'd be a movie and then a secondary feature, and usually like newsreels or cartoons playing within them. So studios were basically trying to make really cheap movies to play as that second feature, and that's where a lot of these 50s schlock films come into play. At the same time in America, they're very much obsessed with space. So then you get movies like The Thing from Another World in 1951. That movie was later remade as John Carpenter's The Thing. I highly recommend that one. You also get War of the Worlds in 1953. You get The Blob in 1958. And like I said, at the same time, you have McCarthyism starting to come up. So you have movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which very much play with the theme of, is that person a communist? Is that person not a communist? Cool?
It's a really good movie.
I also associate 50s horror with pure gimmicks, like all of the Vincent Price movies. Can I go over a couple of films right now that are bonkers? So first off, the Vincent Price is in a movie called House of Wax in 1953. This is the first 3D horror film. I'm going to say a name. Do you know who William Castle is?
No.
Have you ever seen the John Goodman movie Matinee? It's about like a guy who owns a movie theater who does crazy shtick to get people in the audience. He's essentially playing William Castle. William Castle was famous for gimmicks. I'm going to tell you 5 gimmicks that William Castle did in the 50s and early 60s, okay? You're going to love this. All right.
Great.
In 1958, William Castle makes a movie called Macabre, where he took out an insurance policy in case audience members died of fright. So if you went to see this movie in theaters, you'd get a certificate that said you get $1,000 payout if you die of fright. This is a real thing he did.
It's a bit cocky, wouldn't you
Yeah.
say?
So funny. But it's such a good gimmick.
It is.
In 1959, he had a movie called House on Haunted Hill, which of course was remade later. In a bunch of theaters all over the place, he had a prop skeleton on a string that glowed in the dark, and it would pop up at the end of the movie.
That's
Amazing.
fun.
In 1959, he made a movie called The Tingler, where he put buzzers in seats so you would feel the tingle from the Tingler.
I'm William Castle, and I feel obligated to warn you about the next attraction you will see at this theater. The picture is The Tingler, which I directed. And for the first time in motion picture history, members of the audience, including you, will actually play a part in the picture. You will feel some of the physical reactions, the shocking sensations experienced by the actors on the screen. I guarantee that The Tingler has more shocks per minute than my last film, The House on Haunted Hill.
Incredible.
I'm sure people came to see that movie for other reasons.
In 1960, he made the movie 13 Ghosts, where he gave you special glasses. They weren't 3D glasses, but the ghosts were filmed in blue. So if you wore the glasses, you would see the ghosts. And if you took the glasses off, you didn't see the ghosts anymore.
Oh,
That's
Oh,
pretty
that's
cool.
fun. That's cool.
And then this is my favorite one, okay? In 1961, he has a movie called Mr. Sardonicus. Not technically a horror film, but I just had to tell you this gimmick. when you entered the theater, you got a card that had a glow-in-the-dark thumbs up or thumbs down. At the end of the movie, everyone in the audience would lift up their card to the projector booth to decide the fate of the main character.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
How cool is that?
They really don't do gimmicks like that anymore. I mean, Clue obviously comes to mind.
Yeah, that's the
But-
closest thing.
Then there was all that like buzz about how Across the Spider-Verse had different stuff as well, but it was like these minuscule things. Bring back gimmicks.
Bring back gimmicks.
Get people into theaters with gimmicks.
I'm going to go into the 60s. I'm going to go a little bit faster because really the leading up to the 50s are my favorite. My favorite years are the 80s. Get ready for that. But in the 1960s, I call these the auteur years. In the 1960s, so the Vietnam War is underway. The Vietnam War is the first televised war. So audiences are starting to see actual gore on TV. There's also a lot of assassinations throughout the 60s, as you know. And in France, French New Wave is taking over, introducing the idea of auteur cinema. The idea where a director can actually have like a cool vision for the movies they're filming. In 1962, movies come out that just changed the world of horror. One is called Peeping Tom, which I'm guessing neither of you saw. It's a UK film that fucking rules. It's about a camera operator, or somebody who take a photographer. That's the word. A photographer who basically kills his victims as he's filming them, so you could see their face as they die. Really cool slasher film. And the other movie is Psycho. One of the greatest movies ever made.
Heard of it.
Completely changed the world of this quote unquote slasher film.
Here we have a quiet little motel, when in fact it has now become known as the scene of the crime.
You have a vacancy?
Oh, we have 12 vacancies.
One interesting thing about Psycho, though, is Alfred Hitchcock very much fought the production code. Because as you know, you can only show minimum violence, no sex, no nudity. In Psycho, there is no nudity. He has cut around everything. And you also never see the knife piercing the skin. He had to very carefully cut around it, which actually makes the movie a lot better. That you don't actually see the gore. It's just implied, so it's in your head. I think that's so cool.
Caroline, have you seen Psycho?
It's been a long time, but I saw it like a long time ago.
Cool.
Yeah.
So 1960 Psycho, 1960 Peeping Tom. 1964 is a movie called Oni Baba, which is one of my favorite movies ever. We'll talk about that in the future. 1968, Night of the Living Dead. This is a revolutionary film that very much deals with aspects of the world at large, especially when it comes to racial relations. One of the first black leading men in a horror in any movie was in Night of the Living Dead. Really cool movie. 1968, another movie that just revolutionized horror, Rosemary's Baby, which was an incredible psychological horror film. We'll talk more about that when we get into psychological horror. 1968, The Hays Code ends. Okay? Also, at the same time, like I said, Vietnam War is still going on. It's still the first televised war. We're seeing shocking real-life images on TV, so the audience it has a new tolerance for gore. That plus the Hays Code ending means the 1970s has gore, sex, and violence. The 1970s, let's go. In 1970, you get The Wizard of Gore, made by Herschel Gordon Lewis, who we're going to talk to a lot more when we get into gore. In 1973, you get The Exorcist. In 1974, you get the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Don't worry, we'll talk about that again in the coming weeks. 1975, you have Cronenberg's Shivers, which many people say introduced the idea of if you have sex in a horror movie, you're going to die. 1975, you get Jaws, which is the first blockbuster. 1976, you get Carrie. 1978, you get Halloween. Holy shit, this is a good decade.
That's a
of
good
horror.
tear.
Yeah.
It's a good tear.
In Europe, we start getting giallo movies, which are, get ready for this, Caroline, erotic psychological horror mysteries.
Oh.
Yes.
This might be your new genre.
Okay, that's sweet. I'm down with those.
Hot.
Hot.
Dario Argento, one of the legends of giallo. Has The Girl with the Crystal Plumage in 1970. Great movie. And Suspiria in 1977. Fucked up movie. Caroline, let's get you into Giallo films. That'd be fun.
My new favorite director.
I'm almost done. Bear with me. In 1980s, I call these the VHS years. The home video is a growing medium. Studios are finding great success, basically paying nothing for horror films. They're making these low-budget, shock-driven, effects-based gore schlock that costs nothing to make but always makes a lot of money on the home video market. Basically, special effects person says, I have a bunch of extra latex, let's make something. And they make these crazy movies. This is also where we get my favorite films, which are called video nasties. These are movies that were too shocking for the UK. So the UK created a video nasties list, which are movies that were not available in England at all.
Do it in a British accent. Eli, do it in a British accent. Say video nasties in a British accent.
Oh, Delali, video nasties.
Oh, wow. This is the Oliver Twist friend that was cut from Oliver.
I have to get into character by saying "Oh, Delali" from the cartoon Robin Hood. In 1980, you get Cannibal Holocaust. In 1980, you also get The Shining. Obviously not quite gore, but there's a lot of blood in it. In 1980, you get Friday the 13th. In 1981, you get Evil Dead. In 1982, you get Basket Case. Great movie. In 1984, you get Nightmare on Elm Street. In 1987, you get Hellraiser. And there's a whole bunch of other, effects-driven gore schlock. The 90s sucked. A lot of the horror films that were made were either remakes, sequels, prequels, IP, or extremely self-aware, referential movies like Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer. But there was also, so you get 1996, you get Scream. 1999, you get an incredible film called Audition, which is a very underrated torture porn film. But in 1999, you also get introduced to a new genre, found footage, with the Blair Witch Project. Great movies. Have you seen Blair Witch Project, Caroline, or did you avoid that?
I feel like it was like in the culture, so I feel like I've seen most of it. I don't know that I've seen it in years.
The 2000s suck. That's it. 2004, you get Saw, and 2007, you get Paranormal Activity. Other than that, it's like Jason in space or whatever.
Yeah.
2010s to present, though, you get two movie studios that are just revitalizing the horror genre, A24 and Blumhouse. Now you're getting horror really looking at society at large. You get a lot of ideas of grief. You get repression. You get societal issues. You get movies like Hereditary, Black Swan, Midsommar, It Follows, The Babadook, Get Out, Nope. These are incredible movies. We're kind of in another golden age of horror right now, is what I'm saying. And that's the history of horror. Thank you for letting me talk for 30 minutes straight.
No, that's great,
Yeah.
Eli. And I guess we'll keep you on the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you for the research.
And now, my wary guests, we shall dive deep into the world of horror comedies. This will start Fright Now.
So Ethan and I did a horror comedy top 5. Caroline did not have to do this, but we did make her watch the movie Cabin in the Woods, which we're going to hear about that in a second. This is how I define horror comedy. I said it was either comedies with horror elements, like Ghostbusters, like all the Tim Burton movies. Horror movies with comedic elements, like your Evil Deads, etc. Like most of the video nasties, honestly. There are comedies that riff on horror tropes, like Cabin in the Woods and What We Do in the Shadows, and then straight up parodies like Scary Movie, or honestly, probably any of the Abbott and Costello movies I'd put there too. I also made a rule for Ethan and I where we can't do the obvious movies. So I said no Cabin in the Woods, because both of us would have put that probably high up. I said no Shaun of the Dead, because both of us probably would have put that high up. I also tried to challenge myself. So for myself, I didn't let myself do any of the Tim Burton movies. I didn't let myself do What We Do in the Shadows. I didn't let myself do Young Frankenstein, just to try to make it harder on myself, because those would totally be my... If this was an actual, like, top 5, these are the only movies I can watch, I would probably pick those movies. Ethan, why don't you start?
Okay, number 5, a movie that's not on Eli's list is Actually, do you know what? Just to mix it up, I'll change it out just to talk about a different movie. Number 5 on my list is Attack the Block, which is an alien movie that has young John Boyega in it, and it is about aliens taking over the block and in London, and I just love the accents, and it's a really fun movie. Jodie Whittaker is the lead, and she's really charming in it, and that's a good movie. I couldn't put Shaun of the Dead on this, so I'm gonna put Attack the Block, which is sort of in the same space.
That's such a good movie. I like your reasoning of I like the accents. That made me laugh.
I love the accents.
But Attack the Block is a great movie. My number 5 is kind of similar, only mine was like a reaction to me saying no to Cabin in the Woods, which is a movie called Tucker and Dale vs. Evil.
I heard that's really
film
funny.
Starring Alan Tudyk and Tyler Labine. It takes the trope of, and this was a straight up comedy. It takes the trope of teens going to a cabin in the woods and getting murdered by their redneck neighbors. Only the redneck neighbors are completely innocent here, and they actually think these teens are attacking them. And through just a series of misunderstandings, all of the tropes of horror happen with the two rednecks played by Alan Tudyk and Tyler Labine just being scared for their lives. They're so innocent. Great movie.
My number 4 is, as Caroline already pumped her fists to, Scream. Scream is, I did not see this growing up. I actually saw it somewhat recently. It totally rules. And the thing that the first movie is really funny, and it's like such a good meta commentary on the genre. I think that Neve Campbell is great because she's so serious, and everyone else around her is so funny. Courtney Cox is so funny in this movie, and I think that's that was the success of that movie. Like, you have one character who's taking it seriously, and the rest are just kind of like fucking around. And I don't know if the new Screams have like achieved that level of silliness that the supporting cast brings in the original. Caroline, what are your thoughts on Scream?
I love Scream. I mean, I think it's hard to say. Scream 2 sometimes I like more than Scream 1. I think the end with
Scream 2 is really good.
like with Laurie Metcalf is so good. And the intro death with Jada Pinkett Smith, like stumbling in front of the theater is amazing. But also like the Drew Barrymore, I can't think of a more iconic intro to a film in the last like 30 years. Like that stays with you forever. The white sweater. I mean, it's fantastic.
Great movie. My number 4 is a movie neither of you have seen, I'm guessing, called The Stuff from 1985. This is a horror film with comedic elements. All right, this is The Stuff. I'm obsessed with this movie. A construction worker finds a white goo oozing from a rock and eats it and goes, "Ooh, this is delicious." Suddenly, it becomes like the most popular brand in the world. It's the next Coca-Cola. It's this ice cream container of this white goo that people mysteriously found, and it's and everyone in the world loves it so much. And then it turns out it's a monster that kills you. It is a play on branding. It's a play on society. It is a play on capitalism. Who knew that it was a monster? Who didn't know it was a monster? People are getting rich.
Wow.
It's a beautiful movie and some really cool gore effects. The Stuff. It's on AMC Plus / Shudder.
Anyone I know in it? Like, are any famous people in it?
Big no. Wow. Absolutely not.
Just cool. The Stuff.
Oh, wait. I think Garrett Morris is in it from SNL.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice. My number 3 is Get Out. Already talked about it. I think it's one of the 5 best movies of last decade, and it will be remembered.
I probably should have put Get Out on my list. That's a great movie. I didn't think of it. My number 3 is Bubba Hotep.
I never saw this.
All right. It's from 2002. Caroline. Elvis is alive and living in a retirement home. He befriends Ossie Davis, who believes he's JFK, and together they fight a mummy cowboy.
Cool.
This sounds like an improv scene.
Honestly, the movie feels like an improv scene, but a good one, like a TJ and Dave level, well done improv scene.
My number 2 is Ghostbusters. Important movie for my childhood. Important movie for Bill Murray fans across the board. It's Ghostbusters. Go watch Ghostbusters if you haven't seen Ghostbusters.
My number 2 is Dawn of the Dead from 1978. Now, this is mostly a scary film. It's the follow-up to Night of the Living Dead. It's a zombie movie. But the second the people lock themselves in the mall to get away from the zombies, it is a play on mall culture, and there are some real funny moments in that movie. Real satirical, America's obsessed with malls at the time elements. I love it. I love Dawn of the Dead.
Nice. Okay, some runners up that didn't make my list. Zombieland, Slither, James Gunn's movie. What We Do in the Shadows, which I didn't put on the list because I think the TV show's better. And Beetlejuice. But my number 1 horror comedy is Monsters, Inc.
Oh, what a choice.
It's so good.
I watched this movie within the last year, and I was blown away by how good this movie is. I feel like it's kind of a forgotten Pixar, and it doesn't necessarily come in when you're talking about the greats, but it is funny. It is heartwarming. The joke, every single moment in that movie is either a killer joke or crucial to the plot. Like there is nothing wasted in that movie. And I think that when you're talking about something that plays on horror tropes, Monsters Inc. Is above the rest when it really understands what horror tropes are and makes something new out of that.
Oh, God. Is that Billy Crystal's last great movie?
Is that Billy Crystal's last great movie? It might be.
My mentions are Eating Raoul from 1982. It's a fun movie about people who get pissed off at swingers and become cannibals. They Live in 1988, the Roddy Piper starring movie. That it's kind of half horror, half sci-fi, but great movie. A threesome of video nasties here: Fright Night, Creepshow, and Basket Case. Horror movies that are just hilariously schlocky. Scream is on my list. And okay, so in 1977, there's a psychological horror film called House. It's streaming on Max. It says it's a comedy. I don't think it's a comedy. I think they put it as a comedy because it makes no fucking sense. It is written by the director's 6-year-old daughter, and it feels like that. And you're watching this movie and you have no idea what the hell's happening, and nothing makes sense. But I kind of can't look away. So that's on my casual mentions. But my number 1 by a mile is 1987's Evil Dead 2, which is essentially Sam Raimi's remake of his previous Evil Dead, but done a little bit better, a little bit tighter, better effects. Really cool movie.
Eli, I'm so sorry. I have never seen an Evil Dead movie.
You don't have to apologize. You don't have to apologize.
That's wild.
No.
Sorry.
You don't
I
have
saw
to
them because
apologize
I was in the
I'll
musical.
never forgive you. Now, did you see all of them? There's the 3 originals: Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness.
I think I saw the first 2 because the musical's based off of all 3. Now, where does Double Double Toil and Trouble, starring the Olsen twins and Cloris Leachman, fit on this list?
I feel like that's
You're right.
future.
Throw out the lists. Throw them out.
Can that be the next Ethan's Reluctant review? Because I think that's a great idea.
I mean, all the Olsen twin movies. We could do a whole Olsen twin movie episode.
Olsen-tober.
Stupid.
Do you remember the 21st day of Olsen-tember?
Caroline, how did you like Cabin in the Woods?
Okay, so I was trying to go into this with an open mind, knowing that Joss Whedon was involved and like all the allegations that have since come out about him, and also like his behavior in sets and things like that. Okay, I really wanted to love it. I read that Joss wrote the script in 3 days, and it felt like it. To me, I think I wanted to be like, I think the tropes of it all were fun. I thought like Bradley Whitford was fun. I love Richard Jenkins anytime he's on the screen, but I just didn't feel like it's so much in the tropes. I don't feel like I cared about anyone in the movie. So I wasn't like invested in like what was happening. Also, we have Chris Hemsworth and Jesse Williams, and they're like shirtless for maybe 2 seconds of the movie. And that's my biggest gripe.
I think the reason we picked this movie is because it plays with all the tropes. It's kind of like a good introduction to the tropes.
That's fair.
Especially when you see the board later and you see the list of things that could have happened to them. You get the Hellraiser, you get the Evil Dead, you get the Hills Have Eyes, you get Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I think though that Caroline brings up a great point, which is that really excellent horror movies allow real character development despite the tropes, despite the plot, despite like the horror elements. And Cabin in the Woods it's aware of it to a fault, where you definitely don't care about these characters because you're enjoying seeing them go through the ringer of horror movies. But again, the best ones, you are able to attach yourself to, this character's journey. Like Get Out, for sure. Right? You care about Chris. You want Chris to get out. You hope he survives. In Cabin in the Woods, you kind of want them
to die.
You kind of want what happens in the end to happen. You're like, well, I want them to survive so everyone dies. Like, I want to see the worst case scenario. And in Get Out, you actually want to see the best case scenario for the character.
So that's our thoughts on horror comedy and the history of horror. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Email us at ineedtosee.that@gmail.com or visit us at ineedtosee.that.com. And now the music cue. Din, 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 din. Ba, 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 ba. My mama. I want my mama. Ethan and Caroline lost the Golden Globe pool. I forced them to watch the Royal Rumble. I want to bring up one important thing. A lot has changed in the world of wrestling since I made you watch the Royal Rumble and you watched the Royal Rumble.
You forced us. It's forced
4
this
hours
upon
long.
us.
Vince McMahon was accused of sex trafficking and is officially kicked out of the board of directors for TKO Sports. He is no longer anywhere part of WWE. WWE also sold Monday Night Raw to Netflix. So starting in 2025, Netflix now owns Monday Night Raw, which is a television show that's been going on for 22 years. It might be more than that. Brock Lesnar, one of the biggest wrestlers out there, also accused in the sex trafficking thing. He's gone from WWE. A lot has happened in this time, and I blame both of you. But what do you feel about the Royal Rumble?
Okay, it's like March Madness all in one evening. It's like if you put all 64 basketball teams in the same court at the same time. It's crazy. There's a lot happening.
It was chaos. It was chaotic. It was chaotic.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. It was chaotic. Look, I watched every Royal Rumble, and in that wrestling podcast we did, our friend Mike Schiff said, the Royal Rumble is that thing that always lets wrestling fans down. And I thought the women's Royal Rumble was fun. I thought the men's Royal Rumble was boring. The funny thing is, the question was, is CM Punk going to win? Is Cody going to win? Cody won. CM Punk actually ended up getting injured, so he's gone. He's out of WrestleMania. Cody won, but despite that, The Rock came back last week and said, no, I get the main event. And Cody goes, okay. And now there's a huge fan backlash right now against The Rock, of all people. The Rock is, like, getting obliterated on social media. It'll probably be addressed by the time this podcast comes out. But interesting things in the world of wrestling right now.
So you bring up like such a good point, which is that I followed none of the storylines, and it felt like jumping into like season 2 of Loki, having watched zero Marvel, like being unaware that comic books even existed, and suddenly you're in the midst of chaos, and every 2 minutes a new person would enter to a theme song, and I just didn't follow any of it. And I kept thinking that no one at that venue was like seeing this.
Yeah, the audience was dead.
From a good angle.
The audience was dead. It was weird.
Yeah, it felt like last year when I was having to explain Scandival to every single person that's never watched Bravo, and I've watched 10 years of Vanderpump Rules, and I've had to now suddenly explain like why Jax and Kristen having sex while watching the movie Drive 8 years ago has on the implications of the current season of Vanderpump Rules. So it was like, I understand. I think wrestling and Bravo are parallel universes. But also, like, I felt like all of the men either look like Machine Gun Kelly or they listen to Machine Gun Kelly. And I couldn't tell you the name of a single Machine Gun Kelly song. Can either of you name a Machine Gun Kelly song? Yeah, I feel like he should.
I feel like he did.
All of the men in the who are wrestlers and in the audience are like the men whose wives take them to a musical once a year, but to like try and act like they're above it, they wear a football jersey to like a local production of Thoroughly Modern Millie. Like that's who was in and watching that event.
That is very well said.
Well, okay, I guess, Eli, what would your wrestling name be? I'm sure you thought about this.
I like Mad Dog Golden, and then when I pin you, 1, 2, 3, I untie your boot and take your boot with me. So I carry around a big stick with all of the boots of my fallen competitors.
Oh, you've done a lot of thinking about this.
Wow.
Pretty good. That's pretty good.
That's a lot of boots. Do you walk out of these boots are made for walking?
Probably go out to Splish Splash. I was taking a bath by Kevin Spacey as Bobby Darin in the film.
And now it's that time of the show where we make Ethan watch something he would never want to watch on his own. This week was the brilliant Tammy and the T-Rex, starring Bravo's own Denise Richards and Paul Walker. Ethan, how did that go?
You know, it is suitable that we ended up doing horror comedy because this movie really tried to be that, and it failed. It definitely failed. This is a movie where Paul Walker and Denise Richards are together in high school, and then Paul Walker is killed by the bully who like leads him to be attacked by a lion. But then he actually doesn't die, but then a mad scientist kills him and then puts his mind into an animatronic T-Rex who wreaks havoc on the town. But then Denise Richards tries to get his brain in a different body. That is what happened. I think the craziest thing about this movie is it's rated R, which means that there's like a lot of swearing and a lot of gore, like ripping heads off, and a lot of like ogling Denise Richards. And it's just it did not work. None of it worked. I would not recommend Tammy and the T-Rex. I wouldn't recommend it.
How many notes did you take?
I took 26 notes.
Can't wait.
Number 1.
The first ad on Peacock for this movie was for the Royal Rumble.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Note number 9.
Oh my God, the lion is literally killing and eating Paul Walker. This is a thing that's happening in this movie.
Oh, now I need to know number 10.
I really hope Billy dies. Billy is one of the baddest bad guys in movie history.
Does he die?
Yeah, he does. The T-Rex rips his head off very gruesomely.
Oh, God. Number 18.
Number 18. The dinosaur is using a payphone.
20.
Number 20. Okay, this is the scene. Billy is having sex with a girl in a car. She's very loud in bed. But then she starts screaming because Paul Walker Dinosaur is above them. And Billy starts saying, "I'm good, right? I'm good, right?" Needed to share that scene. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, she screams because she sees a dinosaur, and he thinks it's because he's good at sex.
And that's the 90s, baby.
That's the 90s, baby.
26?
The last one. Paul Walker's brain is in Denise Richards' room, and it's hooked up to a camera. And now she's stripping for him, and he came. And that's the end of the movie. The 90s were wild.
That felt like a Mad Lib sentence.
No, it's what happened. It's what happens in that movie. Like, sparks fly and he orgasms.
Can I ask you?
But he's not a body, it's just a brain. So it's like, oh, and she's like pouring like alcohol on the brain directly.
Watching this, did you wish the production code was still around?
Yes. Bring back McCarthyism so Tammy and the T-Rex doesn't happen.
Oh,
William
my
Hayes,
God.
come back. We miss
Please.
you. We love you. Well, that's Ethan's review of Tammy and the T-Rex. Caroline, do you have a movie for him next week?
I don't. I didn't know if we were continuing because the horror stuff.
Yeah, we could pause it. Should we
Okay.
pause it?
Yes. Yes, we should.
You're right, Caroline. Hey, Ethan, next week you need to watch Toil. What was it called?
Double, Toil and Trouble.
Double, Toil and Trouble, the Olsen Twins movie. We expect a full review of that next week, because that is your next assignment.
It's $4. Can I write this off in my taxes?
Hey, you can do whatever you want.
What am I watching next week? What horror movie am I watching?
Yeah, let's talk about this. So next week we're doing supernatural. So it could be any zombie, ghost, paranormal, monster, sci-fi. Ethan, let's brainstorm this. What do you think?
I think that if I had to pick a really like excellent movie that has real like merit, I would say The Thing. It's a really good movie. Kurt Russell's in it.
Yeah, he's supposed to be hot, right?
And it's like it's
Yeah,
Kurt
his
Russell's very
hair
hot.
is
There's a lot of like
perfect.
hot men in snow.
Okay.
Caroline, hot men in snow.
Also, real cool gore effects. It's a flawless movie. Go watch The Thing. Yeah, that's gonna be the one.
Okay.
Good call, Ethan.
Okay. I can't wait.
But if you have time, watch Night of the Living Dead too. Trust me, it's not scary. It's slow moving zombies, but watch it understanding the cultural significance of the movie.
Okay. Can't wait. I'll watch it with my Dune popcorn bucket.
Oh, calm down. That's our show. Thank you for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe. Email us at ineedtosee.thatpod@gmail.com. Visit us at ineedtosee.that.com. Email us if you're one of our listeners from Ireland or Norway or Belgium. We want to hear from you.
Ooh, Norway.
Next week, Feb-Boo-Scary continues with supernatural horror. Thank you, everybody. And
Thank
as
you.
always,
No, I don't.
Ethan
No, I
loves
don't.
Joss
I
Whedon
don't.
too.
No, I don't.
I am Vincent Price, and Ethan loves Kevin Spacey.